promotion. You know, a lot of different countries will want movie studios to film in their countries, and so they have a film promotion agencies. There's tourism agencies. There's so much more. This whole world that goes on, and so I still get that a lot. That's what I do. People think that's what I do, but it's a very, very small bit of actually what I do. This is what my colleagues around the world think that I do. Before COVID, you know, I would go to London often, and I would tell people I was posted in San Diego, or I was based in San Diego, and they would almost roll their eyes and say, you know, what are you doing in San Diego? It's you're having a nice time there. Must be a dream posting. But actually, this is not what I do. This is what I think that I do. Although that's not quite true either. So these are all. There's a little bit of truth, I guess, in all of these, except maybe for James Bond. But actually, this is what I do. What I actually do here in San Diego, and it's promoting British cultural, economic, and political interests in San Diego. I engage with local government here on issues of importance to the UK and to San Diego. So if there's an issue where San Diego is really important to San Diego, for example, tackling homelessness, and there's a UK solution out there, well, it's worth engaging with local government to share that. And I'll talk more about that later on. Report on political and economic developments. So there's a great interest in London. There's a great interest in Washington, D.C. of what's happening here on the ground in San Diego. And so part of mine is to communicate that information. Facilitate and manage visits by senior UK government representatives. So just today, for example, I'm working on a virtual visit from one of our ministers here. And so I'm kind of the middleman between those senior officials and what's happening in San Diego. Identifying opportunities to increase UK trade and investment. So I work with companies, UK companies that are looking to export here, US companies that are looking to set up in the UK. If I'm a US company and I want to set up an office in the UK, where do I go? Who do I talk to? We're kind of the facilitators for all that. And then my favorite part of the job, one of the things I like doing the most, is developing close ties with scientific institutions and research labs. Pre-COVID, we used to regularly host groups of researchers here and academics from the UK. We would put them together with their counterparts, and they would, you know, talk science. And the hope would be that collaborative research would be a part of that. And so that's kind of what I do in a nutshell. And so there's a lot of, you'll see there's a lot of different things there, which means I'm really not an expert in anything. But I know enough about everything to get a foot in the door and have a conversation and have a very holistic view of what's going on. So before I get into the kind of the bulk of it, here's, I don't do this work alone. Here's a map of the UK government's presence in the US. So you'll see the Washington, D.C. is the embassy. That's the headquarters. And then all of these other ones are consulates around the US. And you won't see the government offices on here because the government offices are, it's a relatively new thing. And it's basically putting a small office, small nimble office of 1 or 2 people in a second city, and that works with a consulate. So Los Angeles, I'm under the jurisdiction of Los Angeles. We have one in Seattle, which is under the jurisdiction of San Francisco, one in Denver, one in Minneapolis. Those are under the jurisdiction of Chicago. And the reason I say that is because it says a lot about the changing face of diplomacy. You know, before, diplomacy was something that required these big lavish estates and all this, you know, kind of old school way of doing business, which is still necessary today in many ways. But because of the technology that we have, and especially now with COVID, diplomacy is changing. So people don't really necessarily need to have, you know, you can get somewhere with a laptop, have the relationships that you have in a city, and that's enough to really do your job and make an impact without having to have all the kind of bells and whistles. So it says something about the way diplomacy is changing. And so I wanted to just set up this picture before I go into the actual conversation of what I'm going to talk about. So in this talk, I just wanted to cover 3 basic pillars. And I wanted to talk about this year of global leadership for the UK, which isn't just a fancy title that I just came up with because it sounds cool and it's the right thing to say. It's actually a really important year for the UK. And I think I'm hoping to shed some light on that and people can understand. There's some really key events and opportunities coming up. There's the UN Security Council. I shouldn't have just put acronyms here. I'm sorry. I hate when people do that on presentations, and here I am guilty of it myself, but I'll go through these. The UN Security Council, Presidency, the G7, and COP26, which is the UN's climate big annual climate conference. All of these are happening in the UK this year, and so that's really crucial. It says, it's a big coincidence that all these things are happening, because it gives the UK really a chance to really take the lead. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the context in which these things are happening. So COVID recovery, the B word, I won't say it, but the B word, and then the future relationship with the US. I think these are all the context in which we're working, and how does that impact the work that we do, and the state of the way the UK goes about all these big events and opportunities. And then I wanted to tie it back to some local examples. Since this is the San Diego World Affairs Council, what does it mean for San Diego? And that picture I have there is the FCDO is now the name of the department. It's changed, which is the Foreign, Commonwealth, and Development Office, which is the department that I work for, equivalent of the State Department in the US. And that's the headquarters in London, the King Charles Street headquarters. And that is the Locarno Suite. And if you ever get a chance to somehow make it in there, it is a fine piece of diplomatic equipment. Forget all that stuff I said about diplomacy changing. It's really an amazing piece of real estate there. And just to see and know the history that went on, it is really wonderful. So I'll get on with these milestones. The first one is the UN Security Council presidency. So this month of February, it's a timely month to have this conversation. So kudos to the World Affairs Council here. I don't know if you picked this purposely, but it's a good timing, because this month the UK has presidency of the UN Security Council. And just to kind of step back a little bit, the UN Security Council is made up of 5 permanent members. It's China, France, Russia, the UK, and the USA, and they rotate the presidency on a monthly basis. And they're really responsible for international peace and security, and some of these big high-level issues. And this month, February, the UK is president of the Security Council. And so with the presidency, the UK really has 3 themes for this presidency, and it's COVID recovery, particularly access to vaccines. This is something that's really important, and it's critical that we get vaccines out to all the nations, especially some of the most challenged nations in the world, the conflict-affected countries. Climate is the other theme, which I'll talk a little bit about later when I get to the UN Climate Conference, and conflict, solving some of these big international issues. And we're actually seeing this in action right now. The UK recently convened some emergency meetings to speak about the situation in Myanmar. And we're also seeing some emergency meetings that are taking place to step up some of the COVID vaccine distribution throughout the world. So this is all happening now. This is kind of in the background happening, but it is really important, and it's a good opportunity for the UK to act as a force for good in the world. You'll hear me say that a lot throughout this talk, to act as a force for good in the world. And so that's the UN Security Council presidency. The next big milestone is the G7. That's again, it's a big kind of open forum where some of the world's most advanced economies get together once a year, and they discuss some of these big issues. And that's UK, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the USA, and an EU member. And I have that written down in front of me. It's not like I can just spat them out that quick. Not that good. But it's the only forum, again, where they kind of get together once a year. And this year, the UK is hosting that summit in Cornwall. And I've got some pictures here of Cornwall. It's a really beautiful place. If you ever have a vacation place or somewhere you want to go once we kind of get out of this COVID travel bans here, I strongly suggest Cornwall. It's just a beautiful piece of ocean, and it's on the southwestern tip of the UK. There, they have good surf. If there's any surfers out there, excellent surf. If you don't mind a little bit of cold water. And there's some really interesting things going on. There's a fun fact that there's over 2 million people of Cornish descent in the US. I just learned that the other day, including Mark Twain, American presidents FDR, and Rutherford B. Hayes. So there's some really strong ties between the US and Cornwall. So it's a fantastic place to have the G7 presidency. I think it's going to shine a spotlight on that region and the UK as a whole. And so again, the UK has this opportunity to use this G7 presidency to really take a leadership stance and to lead by example. on a lot of these big issues. And again, for the G7 presidency, the key issue will be recovery from coronavirus and really strengthening resilience for future pandemics. And how do we make sure these shocks don't happen again, and that we're better prepared if they do? That's going to be a big theme of the G7 this year. Helping supply tests and treatments to countries that cannot afford them. Again, much like the UN Security Council, is going to be another big opportunity and a kind of overarching theme of this G7. And then some of the usual suspects: championing free trade and investment, tackling climate change, and championing of shared values. And this is also something that's happening now in the background. So you've seen last week there was a meeting of the finance ministers from the G7. Janet Yellen was there, and they got together to talk about, how can we put together some, economic mechanisms to help the world recover from this shock, this pandemic shock. And this Friday, I believe there will be a G7 meeting that President Biden will be attending. So all this is in the build up to the actual summit, which is in June. So another big space to watch. And then finally, the third milestone I wanted to talk about here is the COP26. And I think this is the most monumental. These are all important, but the COP26 is really monumental for the UK to host this year. It's the UN's big annual climate conference. Most of you will have heard about the Paris Agreement, and that was COP21. That was 5 years ago, and that was a game changer. And so 5 years on, there's a real opportunity to unite the world, to come together and to deliver on some of these big climate goals of that we frankly need to do, or it's a sink or swim scenario at this point with climate. And so this will be held in Glasgow in Scotland, and it's going to be one of the biggest conferences the UK's ever held. It's 30,000 delegates. And broadly speaking, the aims of COP are to agree on a coordinated action to fight climate change, unite the world on this path to zero carbon, be carbon neutral. You'll hear that a lot, or a zero carbon economy, and to get climate financing right. Those are the three big goals. How do we finance these big things? This change takes financing, and so that's some of the things that are going to be hashed out at this COP, which is in partnership with Italy, I should say. Italy's an important partner in this as well. So, and again, how can we achieve all these things? And one of the great things about leadership, one of the big things about leaderships is really putting your money where your mouth is and leading by action. And in this case especially, there's no greater example than the UK taking the leadership of these things, but also showing that it can be a real climate leader. And we've seen in the past couple of years, it's just fantastic what the UK has done on climate. They've phased out coal. We're talking about a country here that has a rich mining heritage, phased out coal. They've pledged to stop support for fossil fuels overseas. Again, a country that has a rich history and investments in fossil fuels, kind of taking a halt on that. They've just announced a big green industrial revolution and have pledged to phase out the sale of combustion engines by 2030. That's pretty huge. If you look how widespread combustion engines are now, to phase them out completely in 9 years, is pretty impressive. And you'll see, for those astute listeners here, you'll see that California has followed suit as well. 2035, I believe, has also pledged to get rid of the sale of combustion engines. And so all of this is gearing up to be net zero by 2050. But again, these are examples of leadership by action, by not just saying things, but doing them and showing the rest of the world. And again, like I said, being that force for good in the world. So those are the three big events and opportunities that the UK has, where it's on the world stage, it's hosting these things, it can showcase what it can do, and it can put together mechanisms for real change. So watch for those three, February, June, and November. And there's other ones as well that the UK is doing, but those are the three main ones. So now I want to talk about the context of these these events, the world that we live in. COVID recovery, obviously, very important. It underpins everything that we're going to do now, everything that we're doing, that everyone's doing, is all about COVID recovery. You know, it's no coincidence that the UN Security Council presidency, the G7 presidency, the COP26 conference, COVID is front and center in all of those. In the UK, again, this is an area where you're putting your money where your mouth is, and has been helping to fight this pandemic. UK science, in many ways, is helping end this. You'll have seen the announcement today that the AstraZeneca vaccine and the AstraZeneca Oxford University vaccine has been approved by the WHO. That's huge, because that means that now through this COVAX platform, which is a platform that's an international effort to distribute vaccines through some of these developing countries, the UK has been able to raise 1.3 billion pounds to help get this vaccine out. I mean, that's huge. It's at a time where most countries would think, like, we got to take care of our own people here, to step back and say, well, we're going to take care of our own people. And you'll all have seen the news that the UK's vaccine rollout has been pretty exceptional. I think they're the third nation in the world right now in terms of vaccine rollout per capita. I think they're second or third. And, there was initial media reports of them, kind of bungling the COVID response, but they've done a real bang up job here on getting the vaccine out, to now also being in a position to be able to help the rest of the world roll out that vaccine, particularly to developing countries, because there's a recognition that this is a global problem. This is something we can't do alone. This is something that we absolutely need to take care of the rest of the world. And the UK has always been good at that, and it's something that they've always done. And that's where I talk about a year of global leadership. When the going gets tough, the tough gets going, they say. And so this is a great example of that. This is a really good news, welcome news about this AstraZeneca vaccine here. And then there's also an economic incentive to build back after COVID. There's this strategic imperative to deepen and strengthen trade and economic partnerships around the world. This idea that free trade and trade liberalization is more important more now than ever, as a way of building back and getting economies back up and running. And so that's the economic components to all this. And so, this is COVID recovery is huge, and it's a big one. So definitely we'll be seeing how that unrolls. I didn't want to add it in here because I hate talking about the B word, but I have to. So it's not someone will ask me about it, and so I will talk about it briefly here, though. It's everyone's favorite subject, it seems. But before I say anything, I just wanted to say that I'm a Remainer. I'm a European citizen, an EU citizen, and I've always thought the UK should remain in the EU. And so the last 4 years since the referendum decision have been kind of an emotional roller coaster for me, just kind of watching this unfold and seeing it happen. And you can see, as you'll have seen, that a deal was reached, in the midnight hour, and we now have, as of January 1st, 2021, an agreement between the UK and the EU. And I'm no expert in this agreement. I have looked at it, I have flipped through it, and it is a stack of legal, whatever you want to call it. That is just it's a tome. It's really difficult to get through. So I'm no expert at all in this agreement. But I will say, in a nutshell, it's 100% trade tariff liberalization with the EU, and that's a first for the EU. That's the first time the EU has an agreement with someone where there's absolutely no tariffs. There's UK control over fishing rights, and that's something that people didn't think was going to be as important as it was, and it turned out to be a really important issue, fishing rights. No jurisdiction of EU law over the UK. That's huge. And I think that was one of the underpinning reasons why this whole referendum happened in the first place, was to not be tied to EU legislation. And then there's agreements in there to streamline travel, scientific collaboration, and business between the UK and the EU. So there's a lot of stuff in there, which, again, I haven't really picked at that well, but I know it's happening. Some controls and checks, as you'll have seen, are being phased in over time. You'll have seen that unfolding as we speak, reports of trucks being, backed up and shipments not getting through. These are teething issues, and all that tends to change with time and move on. But the moral of the story here, and why this is important for this year of global leadership, which I am speaking about, is that, despite the fact that, again, as I said, I was not a Remainer, but I would have liked the EU to stay in the UK to stay in the EU. When I look at it in retrospect, and I think about this and what happened, the referendum wasn't so much of it's not so much of a bad thing as the media makes it out to be, or as all these things we hear. It's just different. It's a different way. And this is my personal take on this. So you can take this and use it however you want to. I give it to you for free. I won't charge you anything for it. But it's essentially a revolution in the way that the UK is plugged into the rest of the world. And what that means is that this agreement with the EU had been in place for a long time, and it just was something that wasn't working anymore for the UK. And as diplomacy is changing, I mentioned earlier, there's new ways to do diplomacy. So is international trade, and so is who you do business with, and so is how you interface with the world. You don't necessarily have to trade with your immediate partners anymore, like you have historically. If it makes more sense to trade with country X because they have something that's valuable to you, and you have something that's valuable to them, to not be able to do that because you're part of this big block, it's not such a bad thing to be able to say, well, you know what, we can kind of strike out and do this on our own, especially the way the world is going now with this pandemic and everything, borders being taken down by technology and everything becoming digital. To be able to have a fresh start, and be able to strike out trade deals with whoever you want, I mean, I think that's a pretty powerful thing to have right now. And so I'm actually excited to see where this goes and to see how it will turn out for the UK. And I'm fairly optimistic that in the long run, this will have been seen as something that probably made some sense. And so, the EU, as much as I'm a ardent lover of the EU, and the EU project is something that's been close to my heart since I was young, I do think that it is flawed in some ways. And so this is a good way to kind of, see the UK's taking the charge. Again, it's being a global leader, and it's leading the charge on one of these things. So it's very British. And so, yeah, that's my 2 bits on the B word, and I will not talk about it anymore. If you have any questions, I will dodge them as quickly as I can. You can ask questions about it if you like, no problem. The next context, and the final one that I want to talk to you about, is this bit about the UK-US relationship. And this is also a very important year for the UK and the US. With the previous administration, as many of you know, we had been negotiating a free trade agreement. We hope to continue that work with the new administration, with the Biden administration, and we'll see. The moral of the story here as well is we know that trade deals are linked to prosperity. Look at USMCA in this region. I mean, it's really done wonders for our bloc here with Canada and Mexico, and it's something that I don't think anyone at this point, if you ask here in San Diego, would tell you to take away USMCA. And so our remit is always to promote free and fair trade, and so that's something that we will continue to do. And in many ways, the relationship with the U.S. is already a very, very strong relationship. We are each other's biggest investors. Biggest investor in the U.K. is the U.S. Biggest investor in the U.S. is the U.K. 1.3 million Americans go to work every day for a British company. 10,000 of those here in San Diego. There's about 10,000 jobs here that are directly related from UK companies, and 1.7 million British people go to work every day for a US company. And so that says a lot right there about prosperity. We do so much together on defense, security. We have US F-35s, Marine Corps F-35s that will be deployed on the Queen Elizabeth next year, or soon this year. And so those are examples. I mean, we develop science together. The list goes on and on. TV shows, culturally, how many TV shows are British imports that we rehash and make them our own, and vice versa. So it just goes on and on. It's just a relationship that should be solidified by some kind of agreement, I believe, and it will be. I'm a firm believer that it's kind of an inevitable as time goes on. And so that's really the three contexts there. You've got those three big events: the Security Council, the G7, COP26. You've got this COVID recovery, the new relationship with the EU, a future relationship with the US. What does it all mean for San Diego? So what does this mean for San Diego? I mean, we're here. Does this affect us? How does it affect you all? And so I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the examples of connectivity between the UK and the US, and then I'll wrap it up there, and we can just go to some questions and however you want to, whatever you want to do after this. But these are some examples, some of my favorite examples I love to shout about and brag about. So forgive me if you already know. The Oyster card in London. Every time for those of you who've been to London, you take the tube, you swipe that, you go down that hot, stuffy tunnel, you tap that little card on a little thing. That is a San Diego technology that you're using. That is Cubic, none other than San Diego's Cubic Transportation Systems that has developed that transport system for the tube in London. And they do so for metros all around the world. But that Oyster card system was a partnership with Transport for London. And it's a game changer. It's been exported all around the world, that technology. So that's a very, very strong San Diego, UK link. General Atomics, you'll have seen a drone, a mean-looking drone over there. Well, the Royal Air Force buys those directly from San Diego. Those are made here in San Diego. And there's actually Royal Air Force personnel that are embedded in General Atomics working on this together. Illumina is a San Diego darling company. Everybody knows Illumina. They're a partner on the 100,000 Genome Project with the NHS in the UK. And so they're working together with the UK to help map out the human genome. BA Systems, another one. You've all seen the big BA Systems on the harbor over there, on the docks. They're retrofitting US warships around the clock. Some of the US Navy's biggest contracts go through that BA Systems, which then decks those ship out, sends them back out to seas, part of the warfighter. The Old Globe, I could go on and on, in Balboa Park, is based off of the Shakespeare Theatre there in London. So there's a lot of connectivity already happening between San Diego and the UK. And so these big things, these big global things, they do impact San Diego, and they will impact San Diego. But what it really comes down to is building these kind of relationships that are forces for good in the world. I mean, look at all these things. I mean, even the drone, people have different views on, on defense, but even the drone is a force for good in the world. I mean, all these things are forces for good in the world that we work on together to keep people protected, to keep people safe, distributing vaccines throughout the world. I mean, these are things that take leadership and take global leadership. And so it's really about these shared challenges and opportunities. And that's why my office exists. It's really part of building on those and helping to create more of those. So one example I love to point out is San Diego is in the midst of a new climate action plan. You'll have seen that they're working on a new climate action plan. They're working on a regional transportation plan. And these are all the things where the UK has a great expertise. And especially now in the build up to COP26, there's chances for San Diego to engage with the UK on these things and to work and to get different international perspectives. And that's why organizations like the World Affairs Council are so important, because they help build a lot of these bridges. They're a conduit for these things. The California's 30 by 30 is another one. You'll have seen California recently announced that they're going to conserve 30% of the state's land and water resources by 2030. That's a really, really ambitious goal. But you know who has a lot of experience managing large bits of ocean and large bits of reef and large territories is the UK. This is something they've been doing really for hundreds of years. And so there's, again, these shared challenges where people have answers and people should get together and talk about them. And that's again, the reason my office exists. And I talked about the banning of combustion engines by 2035. It's another thing where, how do we even go about doing that? There's a good knowledge sharing experience to be had here. So what can we learn is essentially, and this works both ways. What knowledge can we exchange? I mean, we in the UK have a lot to learn from what's going on in San Diego. This was one area when we had the migrant crisis, and we saw a number of these refugees coming from through uh, through Mexico and bottling up at the border here. All of a sudden there was this talk about border infrastructure and smart technology for a border and mixed in with a refugee crisis. And these are all things where the UK, as it was reshaping its own borders with the rest of the world, there was some learning experiences to be had there. Science and technology exchange. We're really good at genomics here in San Diego. What can we teach the folks in the UK who are also really good at genomics? But there's some exchanges to be had. COVID recovery, housing, homelessness, it goes on and on. These are forums we should be having to discuss these things. And so I think that's where, a lot of this stuff really comes to kind of the forefront. So I challenge you all, in the future, and this is something, Kevin was mentioning earlier, that, we have a lot of good international folks in San Diego, internationally minded people that are really good at this stuff. And so, I challenge you all to, motivate these people and push these people to look outside of the city and the county. Let's hear more international voices. I saw somewhere today, I don't remember where it was, but it was a link for folks to participate in an open forum, the Regional Chamber of Commerce. So that's what it was, putting together an open forum for citizens to talk about the climate action plan. Well, have people who have international backgrounds there just come and shout about what they did. The Honorary Consul for the Netherlands here is a gentleman named Henk. He's a really great guy. He did something which was wonderful. He sent this plan that the Netherlands had on developing bike routes all throughout the Netherlands, one of the most bike-friendly nations. And he sent it to the folks at the city and said, "Look, you're doing your bike, you're working on your bike, reestablishing your bike pathways and putting in all these new bike lanes. Well, here's what the Netherlands is doing." And he was positively received. And so those kind of things is what we are all about, exchanging that kind of stuff. Finally, the way we do science and innovation as a result of this pandemic is going to change. Borders are shrinking. It's easier to get people. I've got a minister coming, as I said earlier, that I'm planning a visit for him. He can be in his pajamas, for all we know, taking some really important meetings in bed with a cup of tea. He doesn't have to fly halfway around the globe anymore. So it's gotten a lot easier to do these things and to work with these like-minded people. So look outside the borders. I've always talked about San Diego when I'm in the UK. People probably think I work for the tourism board here, but I don't. I should. They should give me a cut because I've probably sent a lot of people to San Diego in my time. But really watch the UK this year, because it is really a year of global leadership. And it's a year of, like I said, putting your money where your mouth is, taking the lead, showing how things are done. And there's an old saying, I think it's know the way, go the way, show the way. And that's kind of what it's all about. And so with that, I'll leave you with a quote that I love. Actually, I have to put in a plug here for SDSU all the time. We've got some great, this was a delegation that we did. We talk about knowledge exchange, and I used to talk about some of the things that we did. This was a group of researchers that we brought from the UK that were neuroscientists, and we brought them to a lab here. Professor Bouija here at SDSU, who's doing some fantastic neuroscience, and they're still in touch. These folks are still talking. They have WhatsApp groups, and they exchange ideas, and they've exchanged ideas back and forth. So it's a little of example how that works. So now I'll leave you with a quote, which I love actually. So, never let a good crisis go to waste. We're in a crisis right now. We've been for a while. This works for your personal life or your professional life. But a wise man once said, "Never let it go to waste." And so with that, I hope I've covered everything, and I didn't put any of you to sleep here. And I'll leave it at that. Over to you at the World Affairs Council folks here. And I'll stop sharing my screen, I think.
Thank you for your insightful remarks. I think I certainly learned a lot, and I've known you for some time now. So that was great. I guess I'll just start very topically. How did you find yourself getting into this line of work? There's a lot of folks that are, like you mentioned earlier, developing, emerging professionals here in San Diego. There's also folks at the end of their careers with a wealth of experience. They're looking for additional ways to give back. Maybe what was your experience? How did you get into this work, and who helped you along the way?
Meet myself. That's a great question. I wish I could say that I had this career path my whole life and that I had planned this all out and I did all these steps to get there, but it actually just kind of fell in my lap in many ways. And it's about looking for international opportunities where you don't expect them. So, I had a sales job where I was doing, international sales, and it was a dreadful job. I mean, I was in a cubicle with no windows. My shift started at 2 a.m. So I would go in there at 2 a.m. I was half asleep, and no sane person would have taken that job. But I stepped back and I said, well, there's a little bit of international relations here. I had this big map on my wall with all my territories. I learned how the different countries do business. The Brits would always buy lots of little orders, always on time, just what they needed. The French would buy one giant order, pay for it up front. I would never hear from them again. The Italians, and I can say this because I'm Italian, would buy a big order and then I would spend the rest of the time chasing them for a payment. And so it was just you kind of realize how everybody kind of does business. And it was really a fascinating experience. And that direct role led me to this one, So rather than saying, I'm not going to do this, I have this international degree and I'm going to do something international. I said, no, I'm going to do this and I'm going to find the international bits here and I'm going to grow those bits. And it was one of my folks from the UK that it was the one who flagged the opportunity at the consulate for me. And so kind of all led one thing to another. The other thing I would say is there are a lot of opportunities for people to get involved here. One example, and very well, Kevin, is the International Affairs Board. It's open to the public. And, the first time I went to one of those International Affairs Board meetings, I noticed there was nobody there. And I was shocked. I said, I didn't even do that when I was in college. I didn't even know there was an International Affairs Board or anything like that. And I said, this is a wonderful opportunity, for a young person should go to this and talk to these people. You have all of their ears. I mean, there's everyone here. After was a little bit of networking and you got to meet people. So kind of look for those opportunities. Don't be afraid to just, take the bad job. As bad as it sounds, there's a little bit of international relations in everything we do, even as something as simple as, you work at, I'll say, even if you work at McDonald's, for example. Well, McDonald's has got an international supply chain. I bet you can figure out some cool stuff working there after a while. So just the way you look at everything, really. And I think, it's a little bit of luck too. I did get a little lucky, so we'll put that there.
Well, I appreciate the perspective, David, and certainly same for me. And I'm sure many in this room. I'm in global supply chain at an aerospace and defense company here in San Diego. I was telling someone today, it's like being this. You're like the State Department for your company in the sense that you're dealing with, in some cases, partnerships, and in some cases, adversarial actors, right? In your supply chain, they seem to just be doing the opposite of what they need to be doing. But in every engagement, there's an element of diplomacy and tact and negotiation that you need to continue to practice. So I want to try to get to as many questions here as I can. I thought we'll start with the topic of the day here, which is COVID. David, do you have the most recent numbers on the UK's vaccination rates? Lisa V writes, her understanding is that high rates of vaccination are being reported, but few folks have actually received the second jab, approximately 500,000 only with the second shot versus 8 million vaccinated. Is there any more information you can provide on that topic?
Yeah, no, I don't have those numbers. I mean, I know it's, again, I don't remember the exact numbers. They're the third in terms of per capita vaccinations. I think they're the third behind, I think I want to say it's South Korea, and maybe it was a Scandinavian country. I don't remember the exact numbers. Yeah, and I know the different vaccinations have different periods in between the first and the second jab. I think, I don't remember exactly the AstraZeneca one either. It was quite a bit. It was a couple of weeks. And so I think a lot of the vaccinations, the last round of vaccinations has been fairly recent. And so I don't know if that's that number will go up in the coming weeks. And I know that just watched the Prime Minister, I believe on the 22nd of February, it's coming up, we'll lay out a plan for the reopening and getting the rest of the population vaccinated. So I think on that date, we'll have a real clear kind of a much clearer picture of what the vaccination progress will be in the UK. But yeah, I don't have those numbers in front of me. I just know that they've done a pretty good job compared to a lot of other nations. And so But watch that Prime Minister's announcement that's coming. It's coming shortly, and that should say a lot about how the UK is going to move forward with the vaccinations.
Absolutely. I did anticipate this question. I try to help you out here. I did
Help me
read
out.
the Economist just wrote on this topic, and they said, so despite maybe a slow response, one of the worst mortality rates, the UK has been quick to jump back with 14% of its population vaccinated relative to Germany and France. I know your near peer competitors there at just slightly above 2% at the same time. So speaking to that global leadership and getting the vaccine out, I think there's a lot to learn there. I guess actually that dovetails nicely to the topic about the Prime Minister. One of the questions here from Lulu is about Boris Johnson, Prime Minister Johnson's current approval ratings and where they are today and how that might set him up for that global leadership that you spoke to earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speculate on the, his approval ratings or what is going to be like. I know that he's handling a lot of tough stuff right now, so it's not it's not easy. But I mean, we did get an agreement across the table with the UK or with the EU, and he's getting on one day at a time, and so I can't really say much about that. I think it's going to be this UN Security Council presidency maybe will be a litmus test for some of the stuff coming along the pipes. I think the G7 will be probably in June will be really revealing as to how he's received by the rest of the international community. But I think he's done a good job. I think he's got a great experience. He was foreign secretary for a while, and so despite his approval ratings and kind of what his numbers are, I think he's got a mandate to do what he's going to do, and I think he's going to do a good job at it. So he's he's a character, we all know, Boris Johnson, but so far he's been I like him. I can't say that's a personal note. You can take that off the record, but I think he's doing okay. So.
Right. No, and maybe a follow-up question here. Are you able to comment on the UK's contribution to COVAX?
Yeah, so the COVAX contribution, I believe the UK is match funding. The original agreement was to match fund, I believe it was, I don't know the exact numbers that they were going to match fund, but it's been about 500 million pounds. And so the rest of the nations have put in, the UK has match funded the rest of the nations. So the total number is 1.3 billion. The UK's contribution to that has been about just north of 500 million pounds. So they've put in a big contribution into that COVAX pot. And again, that's a big part of that is an understanding of the need to get the rest of the world, particularly those countries that are in conflict zones or have economies that are stagnating, to get those vaccines up. But it's a significant contribution. It's a big. They mobilized a lot of other countries to put money down. I think France followed suit after the UK announced this match funding scheme, and so it's a big contribution. It's about half of the total amount of money that we're seeing now.
Absolutely. I don't see any more questions about COVID at the moment. I know that there's a lot of questions about the B word, and we'll get into that in a second. I guess I'll just lead with, you talked a little bit about it earlier that if anything, the B word perhaps represents a reset moment for the UK's foreign policy approach. And I was, as you described kind of this awakening that we can, the UK can go at it alone, make deals that make sense for its population, but also the global challenges it faces. I couldn't help but think of the US's own approach to foreign policy over the last several decades. You anticipate that the UK is going to begin to lead the United States in a direction on particular topics that it finds most important, most pressing. Obviously, a G7 summit is an opportunity to do so because we've traditionally kind of seen the US as the heavyweight, right, in at least the NATO relationship and some of the other topics that we see. But I guess, can you maybe comment about what you predict in that space in terms of the UK being the first in the room, inviting the US to join it?
I didn't quite get the question. You maybe rephrase that a little bit.
Sure. So I'll make it short. on all the issues that you mentioned, do you
Yeah.
anticipate the UK will be leading the US and other countries as it kind of pushes these agenda? Or are we going to see kind of return to US as the heavyweight in that arena?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I don't think that UK will necessarily lead. I mean, uh, they're gonna set a lot of the like agenda items, and they're gonna bring the issues to the table. But there's always going to be disagreements with the US, and we've seen over the past couple of years, there's no holding back if there's a disagreement. The UK is always ready to voice its opinion, or to say if there's something that we don't stand for, this should be done differently. But I think with the incoming administration, we'll have a lot more in common, especially on climate. I mean, we'll see it's a big priority for both of us, and so I think it won't be so much the UK leading as maybe kind of finding areas where we can work together on some of these big challenges, and then there might be some differences in how we go about doing that. Maybe tariff here is not this, or this, and then those things I think are just going to be hashed out on one at a time as we get there. But yeah, I don't really think that this is a case of maybe like the UK taking charge and saying this is what we're going to do. I think we're going to see a very different, especially with the incoming U.S. administration, a very different, maybe a return to more kind of traditional foreign policy, and the relationship between the UK-US will be more of a traditional one, if you will.
Sure, sure. And I guess, turning to maybe one of the main topics in the region, at least right now, Benjamin Rohn asks, is it anticipated that UK will be adopting a more confrontational approach to both Putin and Turkey? And if you have any perspective on that topic, I know it's been well covered.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I don't really have a, sorry, it's not really an area that I cover much of, but I think, look, the UK is, like I said, if there's something that is the UK disagrees on, or if there's a violation of human rights, or if there's something that the UK is not going to be a silent observer, especially now in all of these positions in which it's in. I think it's going to be, the first to kind of voice, a remark, or chair an emergency meeting, like we've seen with the UN Security Council, and kind of bring everybody to the table to try and find a peaceable solution. So I don't think they're going to be more outspoken. I think they always have been fairly outspoken about things that, again, if it goes back to that thing about being a force for good. The UK will not stand aside and let things go quietly. They'll make their voice heard, and then they'll bring the issue to the table and try to find a consensus between all the parties involved.
Right. I think with that, it's a good segue into maybe some of the economic aspects of the recent trade deal. Davide, asks, with the ebbing of a UK-US trade deal in the foreground, dashing hopes of a global Britain, and British businesses being told to register new companies in the EU to circumvent tariffs, what sort of conversations has the UK consul been having with the United States in terms of trade?
Whew, boy, conversation. Well, I haven't had any conversations with the United States. Mostly they're on a local level, and yeah, it's mostly just it's companies, coming to us and saying, that there's bits of uncertainty and things that they have to put contingency plans in together for this. But I mean, this has kind of been something that's been happening for the past couple of years, and that companies are really weathering. I mean, the government has laid out ways to get around some of these things. We've put in place all kinds of guides on preparing companies on how to um, be ready for supply chain shocks and for disruptions. We work with partners here in San Diego, so a lot of the conversations I have will be with partners that are either logistics experts, or folks that really kind of do this stuff day to day, helping companies prepare. In terms of the conversations I have with like the U.S., which in my case was mostly local government and local elected officials and things like that, it's just to keep promoting the free trade, and to just talk about the benefits of free trade with the UK. And a lot of that it's already, we're seeing that, the UK has recently lowered tariffs. They've done a lot of measures with the US already to kind of make trade easier, especially for small businesses. SMEs have received some pretty favorable in the free trade agreement that was in the works. SMEs were front and center for that, just like they are for USMCA. And so I think it's a little bit of that. And so, yeah, I think that those conversations keep happening, but right now it's a bit of a kind of an unknown. And it's like I said earlier with the some teething issues. I mean, obviously with the EU, there'll be teething issues, and if a free trade agreement does come to the table here, I think there'll be teething issues as well, as there are with all of these things. We're seeing that with USMCA right now as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can probably tell I get all my news from The Economist magazine when I can actually get to reading it. But they describe it as more of the boiling of the frog than an initial shock, right? That with that much time in advance, a lot of organizations had the time to adapt their supply chains, figure out the compliance aspects, really prepare. And maybe that brings me on my next question here. Sai writes, while the UK is not subject to EU laws, are UK exports to the EU subject to EU standards? And you're seeing this question right now, certainly with respect to British-based financial services and the question of equivalency. But maybe can you comment on that as well?
Yeah, that's an area that unfortunately I don't have a lot of. It's one of those areas where you're kind of diving into the technical. Like there's a lot of that stuff is covered in the agreement, like SPS, standards, harmonization of regulation for everything from medicines to sunblock. It's all kinds of things. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a wise answer on that. I'm sorry for whoever asked that question, but it's an area that's a bit outside of my scope. Again, there are measures in place to harmonize some of those things. I just haven't looked too much in detail at them, to be honest. The EU to UK trade is something that again, it's not really front and center to what I do, but maybe I'll look it up and send that to you, whoever
Sure.
asked that question.
No, I appreciate it. And I guess along those lines about trade and kind of redefining the relationship, Martin Bridges asked, will the UK's interest in the TPP, I think is Trans-Pacific Partnership, which I had wrote that down as well. I think they're now calling it the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. The name seems to get longer with each year. But will that be a backdoor to a trade agreement with the United States, assuming the Biden administration re-engages?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. That's a good one. I know Martin. Good, hey, Martin. Yeah, it could be. I mean, I don't know. I think TPP is something that the UK for a while was heavily in favor of and favor to join. So it could very well be. I think we just kind of have to wait and see what the Biden administration's stance will be. We're waiting on a few confirmations and to get kind of get his trade team together. And then we'll see where our hope is to pick things up and continue the negotiations that we were having. I think we were about at the 6th round or something like that. So it could be. I don't know if it will. It depends on what the next steps are with the administration.
Right, right. And I just want to do two more questions on this particular topic, and hopefully then continue closer here to San Diego and the topics that we probably want to get to. So Evan Edwards asks, as Northern Ireland is under EU law still, what policy measures do you believe the UK will adopt if Northern Ireland were to go the route of reunifying with the Republic of Ireland?
Boy, that's a hypothetical. I mean, I don't know. I probably can't comment on that, but I know what's happening with Northern Ireland and the whole kind of the Article 16 triggering. I think that's just something to watch. I think in terms of the policy that needs to put in place, I don't know what it will be, but I know that whatever it is, it will have to respect the Good Friday Agreement. I think the key here is to just kind of work calmly, work at a speed and determination to kind of resolve those outstanding issues with the protocol. And I think that's just a space to kind of watch. I mean, I can't really speculate what would happen if if the Ireland's joined up again. But that is an issue that we're gonna be working out now, because we just saw that it created a little bit of an issue with the EU in the past weeks, and so again, something to work through calmly, but absolutely need to respect the Good Friday Agreement.
Sure, absolutely. I guess maybe a more positive look at that picture. Ambassador John Schlosser and Miss Ann Burke. The question is, do you have any idea when things might return back to normal or normal-ish with tourism and travel between the U.S. and the U.K. And when will we Americans be able to visit England and Scotland again?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we're going to hear more about that with the Prime Minister's announcements on, a road to reopening the country. That will be addressed. What it'll look like possibly for incoming visitors. I know, as of now, it's kind of it changes all the time with various quarantining schemes and things like that. I will say the most important thing is that starts at airports. So it's getting the airport sorted out. What does testing look like at an airport? Getting routes back. I mean, that's happening here in San Diego. Our BA route is currently discontinued, and we don't know when it's going to come back. And so we're hoping that comes back soon. You'll have seen that the route with Tokyo will be restored in March, and so we're hoping that the British Airways route comes back. And I think once those flights are back in place and the connectivity is there, we should see a return to, some kind of return to tourism. I mean, people want to go on vacation. People are tired of being holed up. I mean, the UK is a wonderful travel destination, and it's always been a kind of a tourism mecca. And so we're hoping that those things come back online, but it really does kind of depend on, first and foremost, that starts at the airports. Once the airport thing is kind of sorted, then it really will be up to people to see when those things happen. And I think a lot of that depends too on vaccine rollout and those kind of things. And so my hunch, I mean, I don't want to give, again, I'm a civil servant, so I have to stay away from, opinions and things like that, and just kind of give you, but my hunch is that we'll probably won't see a return to tourism until maybe the late summer. I don't know if people will make it in time for this summer vacation, which is what a lot of people are hoping. I'm hoping for as well. So, but we'll see. We're hopeful that things pick up sooner than later.
I think that's a great segue to bring it home here to San Diego. I knew as soon as you said it, we'd get the question. Tibor Varga asks, would you mind telling us more about the UK's solution to homelessness and what San Diego might be able to learn from that example?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's something I've hoped to do more of. The UK's solution to homelessness is on a city by city basis, much as it is here. I know in the UK, it's rough sleeping is the term. It's not. I mean, haven't really heard much the term for homelessness. And I know the city of London has some interesting schemes. Unfortunately, I don't have the details of them. But one of the things I was trying to look at doing was bringing a panel of experts here from London to talk about that, because I think that's a key issue here that we have in San Diego, and that's something that the UK as well has dealt with. The whole world is really dealing with this. It's not isolated to just San Diego or to LA. We're seeing that a lot, and so I don't know what the exact schemes are, but I know that there's a couple cities that have got some publicity for doing some pretty unique things. I think Manchester and I think London as well, particularly around this issue of rough sleeping. So don't have an exact answer on the specifics of it, but it's something I hope to do, and I hope to bring some of those experts here to San Diego, either virtually or in person someday. And again, that was something I was working on pre-COVID, but it never kind of materialized because things were put on halt a little bit. So hopefully can pick that up and resume that. That's a good question. Yeah.
And David, I guess for these areas of engagement, how do some of the folks that are engaged in civic society here in this room, this virtual room, how do we best employ you on behalf of the UK government here in the city to begin setting up some of these engagements? Is it look up David Pasquini on Google and send him an email, or I guess what's the framework that you would best recommend on how to best go about establishing these relationships?
I mean, people can always reach out to me. I can provide my contact details here, but it really comes to finding areas where, like I was talking about, it makes sense to have a mutual solution to something. If someone has a good idea, again, I'll go back to Henk, the Honorary Consul for the Netherlands, with the thing about the bike paths. If somebody spots something like that, or there's an opportunity to do something to kind of bring people together, to spurn some kind of a collaboration, we have funding for these kind of things, and we do the work on these kind of projects. We bid for these kind of projects, and no idea is too crazy, and try me. I've had some crazy ideas that have been flat out rejected by the powers that be, but there's also been some ideas that turned into really wonderful projects. And so if anybody here has an idea, something they're working on, or something where they would benefit from either a UK perspective, or even bringing in somebody from the UK, a good example is what we're planning with the minister here. This was a few organizations here in San Diego said, we're working on some trade policy issues. Do you know anyone in the UK who is working on these things? And I said, yeah, I know exactly who's working on that kind of stuff. It's one of our ministers. Because of the way things are with COVID now, where it's you can just go online and see somebody, I was able to secure a minister for this engagement. And so I think now is a good time actually to do those things, because you can get folks' ears, and you can be connected to the right people. But it starts with an email, and I'll tell you if it's not something that's within my wheelhouse or my remit. I get a lot of emails sometimes that it's not something that I really do, or I look after. Like I said, I'm very much a generalist. I don't specialize in any one thing. But if I can't find if I don't know the answer, if I can't find the solution, I can definitely put someone in touch with the person in the UK. I'm always happy to do some matchmaking. That's something that, if anyone has anything, just get in touch, contact me, send me an email. I'm always happy to do that. And again, I don't know if you have my contact information here, but I'm happy for you to, I should have put it on the slides, but happy for you to, put that out for people to engage with our office.
I appreciate it, David. And kind of along those lines, question from Kevin Mahoney here. Have you ever collaborated with other offices of other Commonwealth realms? Curious as a dual passport holder with Canada. And the second part to that question, do you ever work with defense companies directly here in San Diego? And a nod to the ITAR concerns that might be challenging.
Yes, that's a good question. So yes and yes. In terms of working with other Commonwealth nations, yeah, that's something that actually the Canadians are right upstairs, so I can tell you when they're working or not because I hear footsteps. And so I've worked on a few projects with Canadians. There's a lot of stuff going on right now, working with our Five Eyes partners, and it makes a lot of sense to do that. So to Kevin's question about defense companies, a good example of that would be defense. If there's rather than doing, 5 different events where you're talking about, maybe procurement, for example, if British companies are looking to access U.S. defense supply chains, well, it makes sense to partner up with some of our Commonwealth nations, particularly those in the Five Eyes, to do work on those together. And so that is something that we've done, and that's something that I have regular meetings with Australian counterparts, Canadian counterparts. Even Japan is not Five Eyes, but it's a company that is a country that we've thought about would be making sense to work together on some of those issues. In terms of defense and the ITAR stuff, yeah, ITAR is always an issue. It's something that always comes up in conversation. Some of that stuff is beyond my pay grade, to be honest. Those decisions are made, we're nowhere near where I am. But if we can help companies understand, what are some of the issues with ITAR? What are some of the restrictions with, and ITAR is basically, there's a list of stuff that you can't talk about in defense because it's a classified stuff. And so, if I'm a US company and this is a simplified version of it for everybody here. If I'm a US company and I want to sell something to the UK, I might not be able to export that because it's top secret, and vice versa. I mean, they're export controls for weapons essentially. And so that's something we deal with all the time, because we'll talk with a company that makes, a weapon, but it also has a dual use. Maybe it's used for, it's really good material to put in an oven. It makes a next state-of-the-art oven. And so all of a sudden you're having these conversations, and those are things that I think are good conversations to have with our Commonwealth allies. And yeah, I try to get those going as often as I can, because it works. It helps to work together. And we bounce ideas off each other all the time as well. So yeah, got a great relationship with our Commonwealth friends here in San Diego, but also all around the U.S. network. The embassy does this. All the other consulates do this. It's a good way forward.
No, thank you for that, David. Yeah, I can speak to maybe the frustrating complexities of ITAR controls, where
Yeah,
just to get on the teleconference for that next Wednesday, you have to go through your ITAR team and get checked out and all that good
you got to
stuff.
fill out forms and forms and
Yep.
forms. Yeah, and you
We have
got
a
to
whole
wait
team.
weeks and weeks and weeks for those forms to go
Yep.
through sometimes.
Big defense programs have whole teams of people that take care of that for them.
That's right.
But I think that's a good place of any to maybe wrap up with a final question here. And perhaps it's self-interested, but what role do you see for the San Diego World Affairs Council vis-a-vis strengthening UK-US relations? And further, what role could SDWAC, this organization, have in partnership with your organization? Is there something that we could potentially formalize in the future?
Yeah, well, I think, like I said, I think the World Affairs Council is plays a wonderful role in bringing these kind of discussions together and bringing people together. I think it was Nikia Clark, who's the director of the World Trade Center in San Diego, that once wrote an op-ed. She wrote something that struck me, and I stayed with me, and I said, I'm going to use that again. And she essentially said that, our job isn't to make deals, or it's not to help businesses win, we can't do that for people. That's not our job. Our job really is to just, as simple as filling a room with the right people and letting them have the conversation. And so I think, there's an old story about stone soup. I don't know how many of you know that, where, there's a guy, I think the story goes, and he wants to make a soup, and all he has is a couple stones. And so he tells all his neighbors, you bring the onions, you bring the beef, you bring the broth, you bring this. All his neighbors bring these ingredients. He didn't bring anything to the table. All he had was stones. And I think in some ways that's the role of the World Affairs Council, is to be that stone soup person, is that you bring all these right people together, as Nikia said, and you have this exchange of ideas, and that's where projects happen. Everything, all these good exchange of information, they sometimes don't happen here, and it's a shame, because we have the people and we have the talent, we have the solutions, but sometimes here in San Diego, we're not good at telling our story and exporting those around the world, and also taking some of that information. So I think that's a key role for the World Affairs Council, and I'm really glad that you folks are doing this, and also to bring that next generation up. So many of these students, I mentor students at universities, I speak at universities all the time, and they always ask me how to get involved. And so I think if I can send some of them your way as a first step, I think that would be a good way to start doing that. But yeah, absolutely. Hats off to you for doing these things, because they're really essential, and we need more of this in San Diego, especially as we are, and people don't realize it, but we're way more of an international community, as you were saying, Kevin, earlier, than we think we are. We've got an international border 15 minutes south of here, and so we really should be doing more of this. And so very, very thankful that you are doing this, and I tip my hat to you, and happy to help however I can.
Well, thank you, David, and thank you so much for your time, for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us late at night here. And we look forward to continuing the conversation. Hopefully all of our members found this very, very enlightening, very engaging, and look to find ways themselves to continue building those cultural relationships, not only with the UK, but other entities that are call our city home and that have interest here. With that, I think I'll turn it back over to Christine and Petya to close this out.
And I think we're going to pass it. Let's see if Joe can give us the slide, then Lulu will cover the slide, if everybody can hold on for a moment. Mm-hmm. Joe, are you there to do the slide? There we go. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot, David. That was very interesting. And if I may ask a final question, what is a Cava Quinio?
A Cava Quinio is oh man, I can go on all day about that. A Cava Quinio is it's a predecessor to a ukulele. So it's a small Portuguese guitar Portuguese sailors, because it was so small, they would take it with them on these ships when they would sail around the world, and it became, it's big in Brazil. It's used in like samba and a lot of these others, and it landed in Hawaii and it became the ukulele. But the Brazilian version and the Portuguese version has steel strings, so it's essentially a steel string ukulele.
Oh,
And it's got a real nice sound. So it's one of these things I picked up during COVID. I switched over from guitar because it's smaller, like the Portuguese sailors, I could travel with it. So if anyone wants to hear a mediocre Cavaquinho jam session, I'm all just, shoot me an email. I'll be happy to join.
mhm.
And today is what, the second day of Carnival? So you might even catch an impromptu performance in the street.
Maybe the time is right. Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to wrap this thing up now. For those of you who may not be aware, we've got 3 events coming up real soon. You can see them on the screen. Philippines, Nucio, which I think he's spoken with us before. And then another person from the Department of Defense.
Sorry. Yes. So Richard Nucio spoke to us a year ago on Myanmar, and with the current military coup and everything, he's going to give us an update. And he's also, and I don't remember the person's name, there are going to be 2 experts. He's got a colleague who's Australian who is going to join, and both of them were like boots on the ground. I think they were working with the finance committee in Myanmar. So I think it'll be really excellent. And the Anish Goel is going to be speaking on South Asia. And I believe this is the contact of John Schlosser. And wait just one second, because we posted it. We are shooting in general for the 3rd Tuesday of the month when that works. It doesn't work as it's turning out. It's not going to work for the May 18th. So it's going to be the previous Thursday, the 13th. So we will be updating this slide. Sorry, this came in like the last 24 hours.
Mhm.
So, right. So we've got March 16th for the Philippines, April 20th for Myanmar update, and May 18th will be South Asia. Thank you, Lulu, go ahead.
Partner events, you going to talk about that too?
No.
No. Okay. All right. And then as a next slide.
Sorry, I didn't realize. I thought you were going to talk about it. All I want to say, because it's tomorrow, is that we are partnering. SDWAC is partnering with WAC Inland Southern California for a U.S. soft power in foreign policy series. I think it's going to go more or less for the next 5 months.
Mhm.
They have their events at noon. And I know that's not exactly what our SDWAC people want. So we are partnering for the noon event that they're hosting on their Zoom account. We are partnering with them, and I'm working with them to come up with some of the speakers. But SDWAC will also have a U.S. soft power series in the evening for us to make sure that our members who prefer the evening events have that. Now I'm done. Thank you, Lulu.
Okay, so thank you very much for joining us. And I'm very pleased that looking around the room today when we were at a full capacity, many of you are members. Thank you very much for supporting us. If you're not a member, we're happy to announce a promotion now, where if you join today, you basically get 25% off. You will be eligible, your annual membership will extend to 15 months instead of 12. And for those few people who may not yet be a member, just email membership@sidwac.org and we'll work with you to get the discount. And with that, thanks again for joining us. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, everybody. See you in a month.
Mhm.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. And thank you, Kevin, for your outstanding moderation.
Thank you. And thank you, David.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. Mhm.